All right. Well, good midweek to everybody. Sal Capaccio, Matt Bove. It's always game day in Buffalo. We had a Bills OTA on Tuesday. We'd like to recap. I had an interesting Wednesday visiting the new Bills Stadium and learning a lot more about that. And we're getting into the weekend here and another OTA next week before we get into mandatory minicamp. It is right around the corner. The end of phase 1, 2, and 3 coming up very shortly, Matthew.
What do you think was the big takeaway from the OTA week 2? I feel like week 1 was, hey, it was Josh Allen, a lot of new faces on both sides of the ball.
Ooh.
Obviously, we heard from Joe Brady, so I
Yeah, I
feel
think
like a
that would
lot
have
of the
been
focus has
something.
yeah, I was going
Yeah.
to say, I think a lot of the focus has been on the offense and of course, once again, specifically the wide receiver room. But yeah, it's always nice to kind of chug along at this point in the season, another week of OTAs and a lot of things offensively that we can talk about.
We are going to do that. Let's start first. We'll kind of backtrack a little bit. Want to talk about Curtis Samuel, his role on offense, and also Kyrie Elam in his role on defense this year. But I want to start with I went to the new stadium site on Wednesday. Myself and
Mhm.
Jeremy White from WGR and Brayton Wilson from WBEN. We all had a chance to go out to the new stadium site. John Polka, his staff, Frank Corvado, they were all really gracious to have us over there. There were quite a few people. I don't want to forget anybody, but had a
Mhm.
really amazing experience learning more about the new stadium. We'd already learned a lot. Now we're in this phase where they've already been building here for about a year or whatever it is. And there's a lot of steel in the ground. The structure is coming out of the ground. It's actually, if you drive down Southwestern or the 219 or Abbott Road, especially, and you see it, it's only about a third of the way high and it's already pretty impressive. So you add on two more thirds to where it is, to two more times of what it is, I guess. And it's going to be a really impressive structure. But Matt, I'm I'm just so excited for some of the things that people are going to be able to see about the stadium and know about the stadium. I just don't feel a lot of Bills fans really understand until maybe like you and I, we get a chance to see all these new stadiums around the league,
Mhm.
like how impressive some of them are. And we're going to have one of the most impressive ones, which is amazing to me.
My favorite thing that you said or Jeremy said, because I was listening to you guys on the radio after you did the stadium tour, and I'm not sure who made the point, but the perspective was so eye-opening to me of I know that the new stadium is going to be taller than where the lights go now, like 30 feet taller. But I loved whoever made the point about driving down the 219, looking out and
Yes.
seeing the stadium lights. Because when
Yep.
I was a little kid, my dad
Yes.
worked in a business park that was not that far from the stadium, like a mile. But every time we drove to his work for something, whether it was an event or take your kid to work day, I would always look out and see the stadium lights. And I would ooh and ah as a little kid of, oh my gosh, there's the lights to the
Yep.
stadium. That's where the Bills play. Now to think that those kids driving down the 219 or anybody driving down the 219 won't just see the lights. They'll see the entire stadium and the like
It's amazing.
landscape of the entire facility. That's so mind-boggling to me just how big of a structure this is going to be, and I cannot wait to continue to see this progress. What was your favorite part? What was your biggest takeaway from going and doing the tour?
My favorite part was it's kind of a surreal part, which is not really it was impressive from the physical standpoint, but we stood right at where the 50-yard line is going to be and the logo.
Uh-huh.
Like literally stood there and I looked and I'm like, "Oh my god, like we're right here." And I said, "This is where the flag was, right? Inside the parking lot, the 50-yard line flag." And they said, "That's right. And the flag's not there right now, but that's where the pole
Mhm.
was with the flag on it." And you could stand there. And what's amazing is you most stadiums you go to, you stand at a 50-yard line and like it's quite a bit of a distance to the fans, right? Because you're talking about the stands. They're right there on top of you. It's amazing. You're like,
Mhm.
how are they going to fit a football field and benches and a sideline here? And it's going to be now we are on video here, so I can show you. If you're listening on audio, you're not going to see, but you can understand. It's not going to be like a V and fanned out with the stands the way they are now. It's going to be tilted in like this, and everybody's really on top of you and even layered over, looking straight down. And if you are someone who knows about the old Odd Memorial Auditorium, very similar, where you hear the stories of people looking down at you. It won't be that quite steep, I think, but it will be way different than what you have now. And everybody's right on top of you. And Matt, the noise that is going to generate is going to be amazing.
So when you say and you give the example of how close fans are going to be, is it closer because of the angles or is it closer because the sidelines will be significantly smaller or is it a combination of both? Because I'm thinking right now, obviously you've been to more of them than I've been to, but I think I'm about 20 NFL stadiums. And when you're on the sideline, some of them are really big, some of them are really small. the ones that I think of as being pretty big are actually like Orchid Park. I think that's a pretty big sideline, and there's a lot of area to kind of move around. Will that shrink, or is just the angle so different that that's why it feels like you're right on top of it?
It's funny. I think Highmark Stadium has some of the less room in the NFL. There are stadiums with a lot more room on their sidelines than Highmark Stadium from sideline to stands. It's more because of the angle. It's the pitch. It's called stacking. They're stacking the stadium.
Hmm.
They're stacking on top of each other. But because you're not going to lose that other element, what you just talked about, you're not going to lose that. It's not going to be
Okay.
necessarily closer because you can't get any closer. The NFL actually has a minimum distance you must have from where the sideline ends at the 50-yard line to
Hence,
where the stands begin. And they're going to
yeah.
have like the minimum requirement right there. There are safety factors involved. In fact, you're so close. How about this? In the corners, you're going to be so close they can't even put a soccer field where the stadium footprint's going to be, but they can just fit it in if you go all the way to the wall. Essentially, that's how close you're going to be.
Okay, interesting. And what else could you see from the part that you were you able to see? Obviously, I could imagine the start of the structure, but was there anything else that like really stood out to
Yeah.
you?
So if you drive down Abbott Road, you see the outside. You don't really see what's going on inside. That's what was really
Hmm.
eye opening. There's so much going on. You see the bones of the stands essentially already. Now the seats
Yeah.
aren't in, but you see the bones of the stands and the way that all the steel is kind of set up to just put the stands in there. And the corners, especially, are very much not going to say complete or anything like that, but they're much more through the process because they have to kind of stabilize those, I guess. And I'm guessing that's why they had to do it that way. You also get a really good look, and we got to stand, Matt, where the party deck is going to be in the north end zone. It is a party deck.
Uh-huh.
There is going to be what they call a long bar, a 100-foot long bar serving
Yeah.
alcohol where you can get your drink and then just turn around literally straight behind you and stand and watch the game with a couple hundred other people or whatever it is.
One of the other that's really cool. One of the other things that I thought was really interesting from just a like architectural standpoint that you guys were talking about was the direction of the field. So this field is more north south than the current
Mhm.
fields, right? And that should have some sort of impact on the wind.
That is correct. I'm going to try and draw a little picture here so everybody knows. Forgive my drawing, but I'm going to basically do it this way, and hopefully everybody can understand. All right, so these don't look like stadiums. Right now, this would be where the current stadium sits. Right here, this one up
Yeah.
top. I'm sorry, right here, where my thumb is. Abbott
Yeah.
Road would be going right through here. This is the new stadium.
Uh-huh.
So there you go.
Okay. Yeah. So that is much more like north
Yes,
south
it is
then.
much more north south, and it's a little bit tilted, but it was put in design. Most stadiums are north south. They actually have in mind where the weather comes from, the wind comes from off the lake, and why they
Uh-huh.
tilted it a certain way, and how the stadium will actually be constructed to take away some of the wind elements in those specific areas where where it comes in more. It's amazing.
The amount of detail that I mean, it's an expensive project.
Yes.
So I understand that there would be all of these things that they think about, but these are things that I would never even a million years think that would go into a new stadium. I don't think they would mind me sharing this, but I'll tell you from the fact of they were even asking about like a media standpoint, and I've had a couple
Mhm.
conversations with the stadium people about what are we looking for about like wiring for audio cables and video
Yes.
cables and space to store our gear and where we could park cars. And I think they're just trying to make sure that they have everything figured out ahead of time. So I mean, I saw and heard your conversation this morning, and I've seen some pictures from Brighton on the website. It's really cool to see it all kind of pieced together. Cause like you've said, I spend a lot of time in Orchard Park just from a work standpoint across the street at the stadium, but I am looking at it from, a couple hundred yards away, not from right in the middle of it on the 50-yard line.
And one more thing that we'll talk about here, and then we'll get to on the field. I don't know if you heard Jeremy and I in our discussion, but one of the most important things, if not the most important things when coming to it, when building a new stadium, the networks, TV have
Oh,
so much input and say in what they need.
mhm.
And if the NFL says you did not make this right to have two other cameras where they need, you have to redo that part. That's how important it is. These networks pay billions of dollars, as we know. And literally, like
Billions.
we were told when, like, the NFL is not telling you where to put your bar, where to put your restroom, how the fan
Mhm.
experience has to be. They're not telling you any of that, but they are making sure that the networks and cameras and where they need to be are absolutely going to be exactly how they need. And if anything like that is not where it needs to be, you better go redo it.
Well, let's think of it from a strictly number standpoint. The money is the money. That's what controls all of these decisions. But there's going to be 63, 62,000 people, whatever it is, at the stadium itself.
Yep,
There are going to be 30 or 40 million people who are
that's
watching that
exactly
game
right.
on television. The audience is so massive, and the money tied to these network deals is so large that everything that these leagues do now, not just the NFL, but the NFL, the NBA, the NHL, anything that smart leagues do is make sure that they are catering to those audiences because they know that is where most people consume all of their content. And it's just the same conversation we've had so many times about the schedule. It is a big, they're TV shows, right? Like they're sporting
Yes,
events, but they
that's
are
right.
TV shows that millions and millions of people watch. So you got to give them the best showcasing and the best backdrop. And that's why these new stadiums are so impressive.
I'm very excited for all of you Bills fans who haven't seen it in a while. You haven't been to the stadium. So when you go for an August preseason game or a September regular
Yeah.
season game, I'm very excited to see the reaction from some fans.
So you did this with John Polka and Frank.
Yes.
You want to
Yes.
hear the most Buffalo story ever?
You are related to John Polka.
Yeah, have I told you this? Like, not really.
No,
I'm
but
not
I
related.
know I know, but
I'm not related.
oh, okay, but I think he's from maybe up in that area, right? Where you are? North Towns and
So,
Grand
so
Island, Niagara
John
Falls,
Paul,
maybe?
now like how you've got a million like Italian cousins who aren't actually
Yes.
related to at all. That's
Yes.
kind of what I would consider
Okay.
John Polka. But so John Polka's father, also named John Polka, is my uncle's best friend, and they were like the best man in each other's weddings. So, and I think my aunt and uncle, no, I don't think this is right. My aunt and uncle are John Polka's godparents. They're also my godparents. So we share godparents. So his godmother and father are my godmother and godfather because it's like the most Western New York thing ever. So whenever the stadium stuff started to, I mean, he's been with the organization for several years now, but when
Mhm.
his name's starting to pop up more and more, I was like, wow, like John's a big deal now. John's a really big deal. He's like in
Yeah.
charge of the stadium. That's kind of crazy.
And they're doing amazing stuff. They really are, and it's pretty cool to learn about it. That was even more of the tour we took and the site being on site, learning the information we learned. It's pretty incredible. So really excited to see that. It's going to be happening and opening in 2026. We'll talk a lot more, I'm sure, between now and then. In the meantime, when fans do go this year for a game, it's going to even be way more built in. Like I think by August is what the goal is. I was told that they would have like the third deck getting started, that you're going to see things really come around out of the ground. All right, let's talk about on the field. Matt, we had a chance to be at OTAs on Tuesday. We talked with several players. One of them was a
Mhm.
guy that I know has been, really people wondering about exactly how they're going to use him this year, and that is wide receiver Curtis Samuel.
I think that people are sleeping on Curtis Samuel locally, nationally, so many different people. And here's the reason that, I kind of have come to this hypothesis. It's not something that's completely unique to me. Okay. Curtis Samuel is entering his, I believe, seventh or eighth season in the NFL. He has not become like a bona fide top option by any means, but the best year of his career in 2020 was with Joe Brady as his
Mhm.
offensive coordinator before he then signed a deal with Washington because he had so much success in Carolina. During that season, when he was with Joe Brady, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but I think I can memorize most of them. 77 catches for 851 yards and 2 touchdowns. Then he had 41 carries for 200 more yards and 3 more touchdowns, averaging like just under 5 yards a carry. So that's more than 1,000 all purpose yards, 5 touchdowns, and touching the ball about 125 times. I think because of the vacancy of no Stephon Diggs, no Gabe Davis, the familiarity with Joe Brady and his skill set, he might touch the ball more than any other player on the team. I don't think, besides James Cook and Josh Allen, I don't think that that's unreasonable because I think Dalton Kincaid will have more catches, but it's not who will have more catches. It's who will have more touches. And I think if you take his carries and his catches and combine them, it's going to be like around 100. And I don't know if we can immediately assume that Dalton Kincaid's going to have 100 catches.
I think Curtis Samuel is going to be a really, really big part of this offense. I agree with you. He's not going to be treated like a Stephon Diggs where you know that he's going to get those
No.
160 something targets, right?
Mhm.
But all of his targets, a lot of them are going to come in so many different ways. He can do so many things around the field. He can line up in the backfield. He can line up in the slot. He can line up outside, obviously. They can throw it to him down the field. He has some speed. They can throw it to him. He's not like he's not Tyreek Hill, but he can run. He can take the ball on a short pass, and he's good with the ball in his hands. So, yes, that's exactly the way I think that Joe Brady envisions using him. And I think it's exactly how they're going to use him. The thing about I'll say it is I think that's how they want to use a lot of guys in this offense. I think Curtis
Mhm.
Samuel is kind of like the poster child for what they want to do with this offense, if that makes sense, Matt, which is have a lot of guys who can do a lot of different things. You never know where we're coming at you from.
And that's the one thing that I will give them credit for, because I have been critical of them at times that they never went out and got another like legit number one receiver. And I still think that that is going to be something that they desperately miss. That being said, when they line up, like, you don't know how to plan for them. You don't know how to, when they get in the huddle and they have, let's say their three wide receivers on the field are Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir, and one of the other guys who's a little bit more versatile, let's say MVS. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you don't know where everybody's going to go. You don't know how they're going to be utilized. You don't know what their plan is. So I think that they will be more versatile this year. That doesn't necessarily mean that they'll have more success, because I don't know if that's going to happen. But I think there's going to be a lot of different ways that they can beat you. We heard them talk about yak so much,
Mm-hmm.
yak. Well, rack, yak, whatever you prefer. But I think that that is something that they are still trying to figure
Yep.
out. And I think Curtis Samuel is the type of guy that can help there.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And he seems like and I, he seems like he seems like a really kind of nice guy, right? You talk to him, like some of these people just really they come across as nice. But what I want to say was he seemed pretty kind of thoughtful when you were talking to him. And one of the things that Joe Brady brought up was he's a really intelligent, high IQ football player. He's very smart. And
Mhm.
he also said he's a really good blocker. And when it was asked about him blocking,
Oh,
of course, receivers don't want to be known as good blockers, but I
yeah.
love the fact that he said, from his time running the football, he understands how important that is from that aspect because he's been a running back throughout his football
Yeah.
life, and to have the ability to block for somebody, he knows what that means for the guy with the ball in his hands as well. And I think the Bills really value that as well.
Sure, they value it, but at the same time, every time that somebody says that somebody's a good blocker, I feel like they're just trying to find something else nice to say about them so that they don't feel like they are leaving like some sort of empty statement out there. So if
Right?
he's a good blocker, sure, but I don't think that that was the reason why they gave him a
No, of
3-year
course not.
contract. No, I also think the priority too should play a factor of when they signed him matters. Like Curtis Samuel was in Matt Collins, who I think are two guys who are definitely going to make this team for different reasons. Curtis Samuel because of offense, Matt Collins because of partially offense and partially special teams. I think that that matters. So I think that they've got an inside track of, getting those first opportunities, those first reps. I understand what you're saying,
Let me
but
ask you this though. Let me ask you
you
this. If you, I agree with you. That's not why they signed him. If a
sure.
guy's known as a horrible blocker, would they sign him? 3 years, $8 million each.
Well, Dalton Kincaid was known as a pretty horrible blocker, and they drafted him in the first round. So I know that you can coach
I don't
that
think he
up
was
and
known
you
as a
can
horrible
change that.
blocker. I think they said he just
Oh,
didn't
I
do it
don't.
very much. He
Sure,
wasn't
but if you
asked to
don't,
do it.
yeah, if he wasn't asked to
I'm
do it,
saying
how could you be?
because
Yeah,
he wasn't
I
asked
don't
to
think
do
it
it because
matters.
he was a guy that I do think it matters. I think it matters to this team that they bring in guys that feel they can block because it's a part of their offense.
Well, sure. Once again, to an extent, but the best blocker that they had on their team that wasn't an offensive lineman, they just let walk in free agency.
He
So
also
it's
played
like it matters.
95% of the snaps, way more than your number one receiver for that reason.
No, exactly. So I'm saying, like, if they think that they can fill that with Matt Collins, right? Like when Matt Collins is on the field, they are kind of thinking like, okay, we will get what we got from Gabe Davis from a blocking standpoint. And Matt Collins was worth what? $1.5 million. It's all hindsight. I'm just saying, of course it matters. If you have
Right.
two players, one is a great blocker and one is a bad blocker, you're going to sign the guy who's a great blocker. But
Right.
if my offensive
I wasn't
coordinator is
even
talking
bringing it up
about
for
a
the point of saying that they signed him to be a great blocker. My point was he is just
yeah,
very versatile and he's very good at all these different things that they want to have in their offense.
absolutely. I just groan a little bit every time an offensive coordinator gets to blocking. I'm just like, I know that you're trying to say that he's a complete player. I know that you are saying that he cares about the little things. Stephon Diggs didn't block, and he's the best player they've had in a long time besides Josh Allen.
Yes. If Justin Jefferson's a bad blocker, no one cares.
Sure.
Right?
It
I
depends,
get that.
right?
What
Let's
I'm but I do think that we have a disconnect. I think you're diminishing what it matters to them. I think it matters much more than you believe or think. Not just
th-
platitudes. It's not just I just want to say something nice. I think it's part of their
mhm.
evaluation.
This is the same conversation and disagreement we have had several times on this podcast about special teams. Like they very clearly care about special teams. And I think that if you very clearly care about special teams, your special team should be a lot better. So you might not be caring about the right things. That is
It's a
one of my
really
criticisms of the team.
Yeah.
But
It's
it's
a
like
really
I
good
understand
it's a really good point and
there's a
question
good
we can have even going forward because there's something that's been happening with special teams. In fact, let's get to it now. Let's pivot here. I want to talk about something else. The special teams point if we can here
yeah,
on
no.
always game day
I'm
in Buffalo.
I'm glad you're actually
But
pivoting this way
yep.
because there was go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah. I
Go
want
ahead.
to
What
yeah,
were you
let
going
me
to
let
say?
me talk here. Hold on 1 second. Hold on. Okay, it's always game day. I just wanted to reset. It's always game day in Buffalo.
Uh-huh.
Sal Capaccio, Matt Bove. Great discussion. I think we're both looking at the same thing. Did you see what the Chiefs said about Harrison Butker?
Yes. Yeah, I'm
This is
literally I have the
amazing,
tweet
right?
up. I have
Yeah,
the
go
tweet
ahead.
up
Can you
right
read
here
it?
because
Found
yeah,
found this fascinating.
yeah, the Chiefs have considered not using Butker for all kickoffs and instead using a player like safety Justin Reed. Special teams coordinator Dave Tobe said the new kickoff rule has kickers more involved in tackles, and they don't want that for Butker. The full answer is worth a listen, and there's the video from specifically the Chiefs. It's special teams, like we go back to the owners' meetings, are going to play a much bigger role. I also saw, I believe, Mike Florio talking about this on the Pat McAfee show earlier in the week about how most casual football fans kind of remove themselves from football after the Super Bowl. And when they get back to football in the preseason and they see these new kickoff rules, they're just
I
going to
know
be like,
I
their
know.
mind's going to be in a pretzel because there's so many different things going on.
I went to Florida to play golf with my friends. They're fans. I have a friend who's a fan of the Dolphins, one of the Steelers, one of the Raiders, and we're all playing. And I'm like, you guys know about the new kickoff rule? And they're like, yeah, yeah. They knew there was something. I started to explain it, and their eyes were like just popping out of their head. Like, what are you talking about? They had no idea. Because of what you just said, it's going to be amazing. That Dave Taub, he's one of the best special teams coaches in the league. He has been for years. That point that he's making about they're considering maybe not using Butker. How about the Justin Fields point we've been reading about? Is Justin Fields going to be used like a Taysom Hill, a kickoff returner? And I'm telling you, Matt, I think we are going to see quite a few teams in this league employ two kickers this year because one is going to be a kickoff specialist. What's weird is back when the Bills had a kickoff specialist, Gay, I believe his name, Matt Gay, was that his name? I think it was. He
Yeah.
was a kickoff
Mhm.
specialist. The reason they did that because he had such a big leg compared to Dan Carpenter. It'll be the
Mhm.
opposite now. The reason you'll have a kickoff specialist now is because some of these kickers are going
Precision.
to have to specialize
Precision.
in precision and shorter kicks that go where you need them to go.
Isn't there a conceivable chance that that is why Matt Hawk is currently sticking around because they're trying to see if he could do both, if he could be their specialist and also punter, right? Like, is the
I
difference
think
between
yes.
him and Sam
But
Martin so
I think
different
Jack
that,
Browning could fit into this. He's the guy that they got from San Diego State as an undrafted free agent. He's both.
yeah,
In San Diego State, he was a kicker and a punter.
I think that if you're going to do this, you need somebody who can do like basically you can't keep more than three guys on your roster that are going to be kicking the ball, whether that's field goals, punts,
Right.
or these kickoffs. But if you can find that middle person who's really good at one, but then can also help you in a pinch, like remember last year the play where Sam Martin got hurt on the blocked. Was it a
Yes.
blocked field goal, right? And he was running, he pulled his hammy
Yes.
at the end of the season, and that was like a thing. So I think that you would, if you're going to have somebody specifically for this, they better also be able to be at least your backup field goal kicker or your
Mhm.
backup punter. And I know that I just made the point about, I think special teams, I know that they care that it matters, but I'm not naive enough to realize like this will be an elevated thing. The guy we just talked about, Curtis Samuel. I could see Curtis Samuel being the guy that they use to return kicks, which we never would have said they're going to use one of their top relative receivers to do that.
That's a really fascinating question. I think all teams have to answer. Like, who is going to return kicks? You're going to get teams who have a kind of more of a traditional kickoff return type player. I think a lot of
Mhm,
teams are going to go more towards a running back type.
mhm.
Not that running backs don't do it now, but guys who can operate in short spaces and get to a spot quickly. Not guys who are just like going to fly. I think gone are the
Tariq
days
Cohen.
of
Tariq
yeah.
Cohen. That's why the
He just
that's why
signed
the
with the
Jets
Jets.
just signed him. Yeah.
Yeah, I think gone are the days of maybe those I don't know, like Devin Hester and Dante Hall, like those kinds of guys. And in are more of the days of, I mean, the Bills have like a Darrington Evans, right? Ty Johnson actually fits this. Ty Johnson could be a kickoff returner because
Yeah.
he's
That's a
kind
good
of built like
call.
that and he's a return man. So I
Mhm,
think that gives him an interesting opportunity and spot. But yeah, I do think that all teams are going to have to evaluate and they're all going to do differently, Matt. No one's going to know how any team's going to treat this whole kickoff thing until it actually happens. And when have we ever
mhm.
seen that about really anything in the NFL? It's all been so uniform, changes here or there, tweaks to rules. This is such a massive rule change that everyone's going to have to deal with on their own and come up with their own. And you, Team A, the Bills, whoever, may have one way of doing it. And after 2 weeks go, we can't do that. We got to scrap it and do something else.
Mhm. Daquan Hardy is the corner, the
Yeah.
nickel corner they drafted from Penn State, right? He was a kickoff
Yes.
specialist there as well. So I would imagine his name gets thrown into the ring if he makes the roster. I think he was a 6th round pick or something like that. So maybe he's another name that we're not thinking about right now. Refresh my memory because I don't right now remember. If you just kick it out of the end zone, you get it at the 30, the other team? Is that what it is?
If you kick it out of the end zone, it's at the
Uh-huh.
30. Yes, it was going to be the 35. I believe they changed it to the 30. That is correct.
That's what I thought too. And we've had the conversation the day of the owners' meetings. Is it worth just doing that? But it feels like these teams don't want to even, those 5 yards to them are such a big change that they don't want to just sacrifice the 5 yards and giving the team the ball at the 30-yard line.
Right. I'm going to just check this to make sure this is exactly what it is. A kick that hits in the landing zone must be returned. Okay, hits in the end zone, stays in bounds, return it down. If down it's the 30-yard line. That is correct. That is correct.
Which goes back to the Harrison Butker point and the Tyler Bass point that if you have Tyler Bass or if you have Harrison Butker, your kicker most of the time should be able to kick it into the end zone or through
Mhm.
the end zone. So that should be like your fail safe of like, okay, we'll give it to him at the 30 if there's a really, really dynamic playmaker who you are worried could gash you.
Yeah, I do think that more teams might just say like, "That's okay. We'll give it to him at the 30." Right? I mean, it's not horrible. You don't want it at the 30-yard line for teams to start a drive, but you could
No.
probably live with that a lot more than maybe what the alternative might be if they try some other things.
I
It's
just
going to be
don't
interesting.
know. Yeah, I don't know what type of players are going to be the special teams players anymore because the whole look is going to be so different. I would think that you want more rangy, quick guys trying to cover a kickoff than your typical like Tyler Metakevich is or something. So I think the perfect type players for this are like a Dorian Williams or obviously not Terrell Bernard because he's very
Right.
important, but
Well,
a player like him or a
what I think you're going to
safety.
see
You know what I
less of,
mean?
what I think you're going to see less of is the skinny, fast wide receiver who could just
Yeah,
run down the field.
exactly.
They don't need that anymore. Now you're
Uh-huh.
going to see more tight end, linebacker, safety types who can get their hands on you, shed a block, and tackle
Uh-huh.
because it's going to
Yeah.
be such tight quarters.
Yeah.
I think that's what we're looking
Yeah.
at
It's
here.
it's a big change. It's going to be. I'll say this too. It's a time that when they're getting ready for the season will all of a sudden become that much more interesting. Those special teams periods during
We're
training
going to all
camp at
pay
St. John
attention at
Fisher,
training camp to
we're all
kick off,
we're all
aren't
going to
we?
pay it,
Yeah,
and it's not even just us. It's like the fans too. The
I know.
special teams portion comes out of training camp, and you're like, okay, now's the time to run to the bathroom quick, or now's the time to go get that soft pretzel. Now it's going to be like, well, I kind of want to see how this all works.
Yeah, me too. All right. We're going to head on out. A short but sweet episode. We like those. We thank you for
Mhm.
joining us on audio wherever you pod or on video, of course, at the Sal Sports YouTube page. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you next week when the Bills are back on the field for OTAs. One more, Matt. And then, of
Mhm.
course, it's mandatory minicamp. So that's going to be pretty cool that we get to see 3 days of them at mandatory minicamp before everything wraps up.